Hello, take your seats. Take your seats, everybody. Can you all hear me? Can we hear? Have we got audio? We are live streaming on Student Pride's Facebook and Attitude Magazine's Facebook. This is the Student Pride Attitude Magazine Queer Sex panel. And just for our viewers at home to clarify, and for the audience here, this is not a practical exercise. There will be no on-stage sexual intercourse.
Okay, well, bye.
Yeah. Sorry, James. Better luck next time. Mostly because my mother will be watching, though. That's why. We can do it later backstage.
Okay.
This is a panel discussion on queer sex, or as most of us in this room like to call it, sex. It's about the ins and outs, the ups and downs that come with it, but the audience participation is welcome. So if you feel the burning desire to copulate with the person next to you, go ahead, just please don't swear, because we are live streaming. And hold your burning desires and your screams, and also please wipe up after yourself, because there's another panel afterwards. But with all the housekeeping rules, this is a content warning because we are live streaming again. So there will be honest discussions about sexual intercourse, copulation, and all the bits that come with it. But with that done, let's introduce our panel. So we've got James Barr, who you've seen too much of today already.
You are seeing way too much of me.
James Barr's the radio presenter. Well, how would you like me to describe yourself?
Oh, sweetheart. You can call me whatever you want.
Slag.
Yeah, that works. I'm not allowed to say ho, am I? Sorry. So, yeah, I'm a comedian, a presenter, I write for Attitude Magazine, and I also host Hits Radio Breakfast and have a podcast called A Gay and a Non-Gay.
And we have got Flo Schechter. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yeah, close
enough.
Yeah.
Florence is a science commentator and director of the Vagina Museum, the only Vagina Museum in the world. Over here we've got the incredible activist and writer Charlie Craggs.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, guys.
And television's Dr. Ranj Singh, who needs no introduction at all for all the amazing work that he does.
Thank you. Very kind.
So we're going to get into it, we're going to dive into queer sex. I'm going to start with you, Florence. Shock. What is the biology of same-sex attraction? Because society tells us that it's something quite unique to humans, but actually your research shows that it's very widespread and very common.
So I want to caveat this with it can be quite dangerous to talk about the biological origins of queer sex in humans, especially with the rise of fascism that we are currently experiencing. But I can talk about from a sort of an animal perspective. It's been observed in over 1,500 species. It is so common because animals have done what humans do, which is they've decoupled sex from reproduction. So they use sex to do things other than baby making, like forming bonds, reducing tension, climbing the social hierarchy, and obviously it feels nice. So once you kind of accept the fact that we have sex for reasons other than baby making, like there's no reason why you wouldn't do it with someone who's not of the opposite sex to you. And loads and loads of animals do it, absolutely all of them.
You've given some great examples on your in your talks before about elephants,
Yes.
for example. They'll only have sex with a female partner. Well, male elephants will have sex with a female partner just to reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
They'll often partner up with other men.
Yes.
I love elephants.
Yeah, I love bighorn sheep. So they're this sheep that live in Colorado. Was that a whoop for bighorn sheep?
The bighorn sheep, fan bases over there.
So they usually live in sex-segregated groups, and then they only ever come together for a very short time of the year to mate. The rest of the time, the bachelor group, the males, they are constantly having sex, like proper full-on anal sheep all the time, and they are also really interesting. Sheep, yeah, sheep do anal. Loads of animals do anal. Animals do oral, fingering. Do you know what's my favorite? Bonobos.
Fingering.
They do fingering. How do they do fingering?
No, not sheep. Other animals. But like orangutans, for example, they finger themselves with their feet, like that.
No way.
Yeah.
I need to learn that.
That's not fingering, is it?
Towing. Yeah. I really like bonobos. They do penis fencing. Which is when you hang two males facing each other, hang from a tree, and then like that with their penises.
I feel like I did something like that last weekend.
I've done that.
I think what we take from this is that queer sex, which we'll call it, as we like to call it, sex, it's not uncommon. It's actually very natural. But what has become common in society, in humans, is that we demonize it. And we make ourselves feel guilty for it because, we're this minority and we have years of Christian and religious intolerance. And that's hard to overcome, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really hard to overcome, but I think it's important to remember that hasn't been a constant. There are loads of cultures and societies all over the world throughout time that have been very pro or sort of queer sex has been very normal, and then usually what has happened is Britain has come along and said, you're part of the empire now, and you're not allowed to do that anymore. So for example, all over India, there's like these beautiful carvings across temples of just like orgies of everyone, of every gender, having all this sex.
All of them were at it until the Brits came along.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like a very Western thing, and if we had it before, then we can have it again.
But nobody teaches us about the queer sex that we have. We have to kind of discover it ourselves. I mean, certainly the conversation has changed. We've talked on this slot, actually, with Attitude Magazine before about sex and relationship education, which is still, a conversation incoming. But we have to discover these things ourselves. You talk about things like anal sex, douching. It's like nobody teaches you these things. It's impossible, like the female bodies as well. Let's talk about some of our first sexual experiences. Is there anybody that wants to chime in with their first queer sexual experience?
Who wants to chime in with their first queer sexual experience? I'm sure, like, my first sexual experience was back in the Victorian ages. It's a rather long time ago. I think they did it differently back then. For those of us who grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we didn't have all of the stuff we have around queer sex right now, and all of the awareness and the knowledge and the acceptability to some extent that we do. So a lot of us had to make a lot of mistakes and work it out for ourselves and kind of, fumble, for want of a better word, our way through the dark. It's not all of us have had great experiences to start off with, but we recognize that it was just a first experience. But then a lot of heterosexual people, I think, at the time probably didn't have great first sexual experiences either. I'm hoping things will have changed nowadays for younger people because we are talking about it a bit more. We are going to have a PSHE or PSRE, whatever you want to call it, curriculum that is going to cover some of these things, which is a fantastic thing as of this year.
Was your first queer sexual experience an enjoyable one?
I think it was more of a exploratory thing, exploring feelings and exploring something that I'd never really had before.
Did it feel weird when you were doing it?
Hey?
Did it feel weird when you were doing it?
So the thing is, my first same-sex sexual experience, having been with somebody of the opposite sex for a long time prior to that, was riddled with a lot of guilt and a lot of other feelings, and it was colored by so many other things because I didn't really know who I was, and I was just kind of discovering it and kind of working myself out. So for me, it felt probably different to what it would feel like for someone who's doing it for the first time now. But I'm sure that a lot of people share that the first time it happened for them as well.
When was your first enjoyable sexual experience, James?
Thank God you asked.
There's a lot of fumbles, I'm sure, but when was the first time you actually thought, this is good, I feel comfortable doing this?
I think it was with a guy called Jamie.
You named him.
I do, yeah. That was
Go
the first
right
time
in
it was
with the
enjoyable.
name. Go
That
on.
was the first time I had sex, and I thought, actually, like, I'm good with this. It was the first positive sex experience.
How old were you?
I was 15 at that point, but then he cheated on me with my other boyfriend. So it didn't really go very well. But that was the first positive time, like when it felt safe.
Flo?
I remember I would say, do you want me to say enjoyable or just first?
Say your first and then your enjoyable one as well.
Oh, gosh. Well, because I remember my first queer sexual experience was probably masturbating to porn.
Wow.
And it was really weird because I was like 14 when I first getting like sexual urges, and like The second I went through puberty, I was like, yeah, I'm bi. Yeah, I'm just, no question. And I remember watching like online lesbian porn and being like, is that what they do? Because they look like they're really not enjoying it. You know, like lesbian porn, they're always like arm's length to each other because they've got to get all of this on the screen because it's made for men. And
Really?
Yeah, really, I know.
I've never seen it.
No. So it was really, really odd. And then when I had my first enjoyable sexual queer experience, oh God. Oh no, this is so bad. Why can't I remember anything? I spent quite a few years not enjoying sex, to be honest.
I think that's quite common, though.
Yeah.
Like, I remember there was a lot of guilt attached with me, with what I, growing up as I did in a religious household in South London, which was a very masc environment. Queer sex for me was always something that felt wrong. It wasn't until my early 20s I started to realize my body wasn't something to be embarrassed about.
Yeah. I always felt all right about my body. It was the queer bit, because I grew up in also a very religious household, and one of my earliest memories was when my cousin was born, and he has an older brother. And I remember my older male cousin, he's like 3, and he's so excited about his new baby brother. He was kissing him, and he was like, oh, it's so exciting. And I remember so vividly my grandfather saying, as long as he doesn't do that when he's older. And then I was like, oh, I was born into that family. Okay, never gonna feel comfortable about that ever again. So I kind of just was like, oh, that's just something that I do, and it's not my real life. Do you know what I mean? It's like something I do over there.
Charlie, when did you first start to explore sex as a trans person? Because it's loaded with a lot of the other issues and the challenges that you face in your identity.
Yeah, so I came out as trans when I was about 21, but it wasn't until I was maybe 23 that I started having sex, because I just felt so uncomfortable in my body, which is something that I know a lot of trans people's stories that have the same narrative. And it's kind of mad to think that just someone wouldn't have sex for that long, but I just felt so uncomfortable with myself, and I didn't feel. It was also about the comfort of the other person. I felt like, why would a guy, because obviously well, not obviously, but I'm straight, so I sleep with straight guys. And I was like, well, they wouldn't want to sleep with me if I look bad, or if I'm at a certain point in my transition. So I waited until I felt like I was good enough. And really looking back, that wasn't a stupid thing. They should be so lucky to get whatever I give them. But, sorry. Because, I'll tell you why. Because we're talking about our first queer experience. My first queer experience was great. My first queer experience was in an all-boys Catholic school in West London. But my first straight experience was crap. And pretty much straight, well, not every pretty much straight, but a lot of the sex I've had since transitioning with straight guys now is crap. It's so, and I don't know, of the porn, we're talking about where it's so male-centered, about straight men's, gays and stuff. But it's a massive differentiation between queer sex and straight sex. So I'm going to conversion therapy at the moment, guys. I'm trying to become a lesbian.
Yes!
So yeah, no, it's very interesting as someone who's experienced both queer sex and straight sex. And
Do you feel scared of sex?
Oh, absolutely not. No. I've always been very sex positive. I think the fact that I had sex in an all-boys Catholic school, in the school, kind of demonstrates that. But it's more that I think you do, when you're a trans woman engaging with straight men, when you look at the murder rates, and it's always usually a man who has slept with us who kills us, either directly after or because of the shame or something.
But how do you separate the fetishization that comes with men seeing trans people as objects and not people?
I mean, I don't think I've learned that yet. So if anyone in the audience knows how to deal with that, the differentiation between fetishization and just a guy liking you, it's very hard to know someone's true intentions, because I don't know. It's very, very hard. I think the dream is just to find someone who is oh, you're trans, but I don't care. You meet, and your transness isn't the whole kind of why you met and why you had sex, but that's very rare. If you're meeting on an app and people swipe on you and then the first thing they talk about is your transness, it's very much the reason usually why they they're interested in you, and you're, yeah, it's very hard to go from that kind of casual sex kind of feel to the wifey girlfriend feel, because men are more than happy. Most straight men would have sex with a trans woman. There's such a misconception in the media that we're so undesired, but my DMs are popping, and I'll put, can we put a screenshot up? Like, but the thing is that they'll sleep with you, but they want to date you because they don't want to get to the point where it's serious that they've got to tell their friends and their family that they're dating a trans woman because of how taboo it is. So yeah, it's a hard thing it's hard to toe the line, and I'm learning.
Isn't that part of the issue, Charlie, that you're almost a taboo?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
So, they'll have sex with you, but they won't tell their friends about you that they will date you or anything
absolutely.
like that. Any subsection of the LGBT plus community has the potential to be fetishized.
Yeah.
Whether you're black, whether you're Asian, any non-Caucasian, ginger, trans people, it's, any subsection of it gets fetishized. And I think we need to recognize that sometimes people use that fetishization as a weapon as well. They say, oh, no blacks, Asians, no, et cetera, and some people will say, I'm only here for trans people. And I think we have to be really careful what kind of message that sends out, because we're supposed to be an all-encompassing, inclusive community, and actually we're probably the worst perpetrators of discrimination, I think, compared to some other communities that we know of.
Why do you think that is?
I think it is part of a throwback is that when you are discriminated against your entire life, you cannot help but carry some of that across into your own world. You will respond in one of two ways. You will either be very anti-discrimination and be very, very welcoming and open, or you will go the other way. And this is what happens. And I think we see that sort of weird dichotomy on apps. You'll see it on apps quite a lot. I think it's really sad, and I think it's probably a topic of discussion all in itself, but the LGBT plus community is a wonderful, wonderful family that is so colourful and so rich and so diverse, and I love that. But yet, time and time again, we still see on things like apps, so I have certain preferences, or I will only date this kind of person.
How do we differentiate between fantasy and fetishization? Are they two sides of the same coin? Are they different?
It's dependent on the individual, right, and how open your mind is, I suppose.
I've always had the feeling like it's down to respect. It's like, is this person having sex with me because they think I'm really sexy, or is it like I'm an object in their eyes? It's like, am I a person or am I an object? Do they respect me? And that's the difference between like having a real preference and it just being a fetish.
Yeah, you can usually smell that out as well. If not when you're talking to someone, definitely after you've had sex the first time, you can smell if like, oh, I was just like a hit off the bucket list. And I'm sure this is the same even for like, if a gay guy is dealing with like a closeted guy or like a straight guy on the apps who is like, not out, like, be it like they're all for it, and then after you've had sex, they just are in silence and they might act funny. Like, I've definitely had that experience. So I think that's usually a clear indication of whether someone sees you as just an experience or a person more than your body and more than your gender identity or your sexual orientation.
One of the things that's constantly tied up with queer sex is the idea of STIs and disease, and we've had that message non-stop really since the AIDS crisis, and although recently we've seen a decline in HIV rates because of PrEP and these other wonderful drugs that have come in, but there's been a huge steep rise in STIs, hasn't there?
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. We've seen about a 25% increase in cases of gonorrhea, 5% increase in syphilis. Conversely, you've seen declining rates of HIV, particularly in London. You've seen declining rates of HPV-related illnesses and cancers and things like that, genital warts, which is fantastic. That's because of the vaccination program. But I think this rise that we're seeing in STIs is a continuation of what has been happening anyway over several years. But one of the big worries that we're having, and actually one of the I suppose, side effects of things like PrEP has been that we've seen declining rates of HIV, but people are using PrEP as if it is a universal protective mechanism and not realizing that it actually isn't. And actually some of these other STIs that were kind of forgotten a little bit, chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, for example, has been forgotten, can actually be potentially quite serious and give you longer-term complications.
I want to come to James. Shared with me the information that last summer, you were tested in June or July, you were fine, and then in August you got tested for chlamydia, wasn't it? And then from chlamydia, you developed an arthritis, a reactive arthritis.
Yeah.
And we've always had the message as gay men, because we know chlamydia can be damaging for women because it can affect your ability to have children. But I never from my life knew that chlamydia, because we're always told it's harmless in men, can give you arthritis.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So how was that experience? So what did you think when you got that news?
Well, I didn't actually know I had chlamydia when I developed reactive arthritis. And if you're not sure what that is, that's basically when you get arthritis. And there's no history of arthritis in my family, but it led me to not be able to walk for like 3 months. So I spent the first month of it just in bed and being wheeled around. Even putting like a duvet over my feet would be the most excruciating pain ever. And I saw a doctor, and he was trying to figure out what had happened. And I think he realized I was gay because I was wearing these trainers, actually, and they've got like a little rainbow on the back. Because as I walked out the surgery, he was like, "Stop! I think you've got chlamydia." And then I tested for chlamydia, and yeah, that's basically it. So I had this reaction.
And what did it do to you?
What did it do to me?
What were the physical symptoms?
My both feet were like enormous. It got worse after that point where I couldn't wear shoes. So I was in Crocks for a whole... Can you imagine how awful that was?
It's the hidden horrors of chlamydia. Yeah.
The hidden horrors. So I was wearing Crocs. I had to get rid of skinny jeans. I was just wearing like tracky pants. I was ordering... I mean, the expense of being, I guess, disabled at that point.
You were on crutches.
Is ridiculous. Well. Not at first. It took a while to be on crutches because the pain of it was so intense. So I was delivering food all the time. I couldn't stand up in a kitchen to make food myself.
This is just 6 months ago now.
Yeah, not that long ago.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. It was only in December that I started to be able to like stand up again. So I was brushing my teeth, sat down, shaving, sat down. It was really horrible. It would take me ages to cross a road, or getting a train was horrendous because a platform is long, really long. So yeah.
So what was the mental health impact of?
It's still with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still not 100%. And whenever I'm like, even just then when I came down that staircase, I was like, wow, I can walk down a staircase. That's incredible. But standing for a long period of time, it kind of comes back a bit. But the mental impact was bad because, previously I'd had like suicidal thoughts and been very depressed. So having this brought back some of that, and because you can't move, I guess I was just feeling like, what is the point in me even being here? Like I can't do anything, and I can't at the minute. I still can't really get back to the gym or do anything that is like positive for my body because I'm still in a bit of a hangover from it. But I'm okay. I mean, I don't know what you're applauding.
No, it's absolutely incredible that you're sharing that story. I mean, this is the safest space you could probably share that story. And hopefully what it will mean is that people are going out there and getting tested more, because even if you're on PrEP, it doesn't protect you from all these other things and things we don't know about.
Yeah. I don't know how common it is to get reactive arthritis from
But
chlamydia.
even if it's not common, it's, you don't know what's around the corner. We're
Yeah.
not educated enough to understand what we're doing.
It's so important to use protection, and that isn't PrEP, that's other protection.
Well, protection is getting tested.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a form of protection. It's looking after you. So I get tested every 3 months, have a full sexual health screen just because I'm busy. That's what happens. One of the things we don't talk about, Florence, is STIs amongst women. We hear it all the time when it comes to queer sex at least. It's always about the conversations around men. As a female of queerdom, how does that relate to you and your sex life?
Well, my current sex life is quite boring because I've been dating a cis man for 4 years. I know. But you're just like gross. But it is really interesting because a lot of queer women or queer vulva havers are like, oh, I don't need to do that. Like, that's not relevant to me. Like, I don't have any ejaculate, you won't put things inside of anything. And so a lot of the time they'll just not use protection at all. And the protection we do have is so gross. Like, have you ever had one of those dental dams? Oh my God, they're hot. So
clinical, isn't it?
Oh, it's just like put some cling film over. It's the unsexiest thing in the world. And I mean, I don't know like the stats of it, but it's just like a lot of the time it's not something we talk about. Because also, when you have a vulva, the thing you're most worried about is getting pregnant. And so, you know, it's like, oh, finally, I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Do you feel women take care of their sexual health as much as they should do?
I think everyone can always do better. I think it's very stigmatizing when you try and do something about it, because something that especially women will have is that like, you're a slut, that's what they'll call you. If you have to get STI checks too regularly, you feel worried about like going to your GP too often and always seeing the same nurse every 3 months. It's like you don't want to feel like that. But there are ways of getting around it. Like I went to 56 Dean Street once, and they are the absolutely loveliest people in the world. I was getting a blood test, and I have eczema. And she was looking at it, this nurse, and it's like very subtle. I don't know if you can see it, but she was looking at it for so long, and she had this very concerned face. And then I realized, and I was like, oh, honey, they're not track marks, it's eczema. But she was so like non-judgmental. She was just like concerned for me. I could see it in her face that I was like, if it was, I'd probably feel okay talking to her, but I wouldn't feel okay talking to someone at my home GP surgery about it.
When it comes to trans, obviously, then dealing with your sexual health must be quite scary, because how do you know you're going to go somewhere and not be judged or be asked really intrusive questions? Like,
Yeah.
What's your personal experience related to that?
I mean, I can deal with intrusive questions, but I've had doctors literally be like, get out my room. Like, I've literally had doctors look at me like disgust. Literally, yeah. I did a change order petition when I first transitioned, because I had to see like three of my local GPs, to have one just send an email to refer me to a gender clinic. So like from that point on, was like, nope, only going to like transgender specific. Because there's, if anyone who doesn't know, there's on a Wednesday night in Soho, they shut down, it's part of 5016 Street, but I can't remember, it might be that building, I can't remember. Clinic Cube, it's called Clinic Cube, but they shut down one of the buildings, and there's a floor on the second floor that's just for trans people, and all the doctors are trained in how to deal with trans people, so they're not gonna like, make you feel like this, basically. There's like, even the staff, a lot of them are trans, everyone in the waiting room is trans, so you just feel safer and more comfortable. So that's my way of getting around it, but I feel sorry for people who don't live in London and don't have access to something like that at the drop of a hat. Like, I think it'd be worth it, even if you don't have much money, get like a mega bus down, like, or something, if you don't, do you know what I mean? Like, it's worth it to have the luxury of sitting in going to a space where you know you're not gonna get treated like a piece of dirt or stared at or laughed at by other people getting checked, or the doctors like happen to imagine, like, I can't imagine, like, also because I'm not one of these trans girls who live stealth. Like, I think like I come in the room and my voice is there before me, so like I don't ever have to have the experience of like pulling down my trousers and the doctor being shocked or something. But I've had trans friends who've literally had that experience of like the doctor didn't even know they were trans until they were tested. Like, so I think it's just, we need more spaces like that. There needs to be like a clinic use like all over.
You're a very strong and confident person. Not every trans person has that inner strength, because they've gone through a very difficult journey of, like you said, isolated.
And imagine, so I do consider myself very confident and bolshy and strong, but if I'm even scared of going to my GP because of, like, imagine someone who's quite timid, you know, it's not right that this is the way it is, but it is the way it is. So until things are fixed, I think we need to, we need to be getting mega buses down to Soho once every while to get checked.
What can people do, Ranj, if they are not necessarily living in a big city hub and they identify as LGBTQ and they're worried about their sexual health or something? I mean, what do you do if you go to your doctor, for example, and they're a little bit homophobic or transphobic? And where are your avenues of... Can you complain about them? Can you seek help elsewhere? Or
I think it's really sad that the NHS, which is a nationwide organisation, is so different depending on where you are. We're very lucky in London. We have a lot of great services, particularly for things like trans people, which you won't get outside big cities. And the experience of people outside such big cities is very, very different. And things are changing within the NHS. It is a bit of an archaic organisation sometimes, but there is a movement to be a lot more inclusive and to think about things like the experiences of other people as well, not just be so heteronormative in its approach, which it has been for such a long, long time. For example, a lot of people may not realise that if you're trans, if you're female to man trans, you still need to think about, if depending on what your stage you are, you may still have a cervix, you probably still need cervical screening. And some GPs may not realise that, some patients may not realise that. And likewise, if you're male to female and you've got a prostate, then eventually you may have to think about something like that in the future. So we are waking up to these kinds of issues a bit more. There are pockets of really good practice around the country, particularly in big cities. People are starting to set up special clinics, people are starting to set up special services, and the charity sector does a huge amount. So if you are stuck in St Elsewhere's and your GP or doctor, your local health services just don't get you, there is probably someone on a national level that will be able to help out, that you can get in touch with, that can either supply a service to you directly, point you in the right direction, or maybe even get in touch with your local services and say, maybe we need to set something up. We are, for a lot of people that will be worried about going to doctors, we are getting better at this. We are. We're not perfect. We're not great. We tend to lag behind the rest of society, but things are changing.
As we start to wrap up, I want to go back to what you spoke about earlier, is that a lot of our first queer sexual experiences are through porn. And porn has it's this flip-sided coin again of fantasy versus fetishization, and it's something we all engage with, or most of us engage with, through a fantasy element or something, but it can also be quite troublesome.
Yeah. At the Vagina Museum, we have to talk about online porn a lot because it's like such a pervasive part of our culture at the moment, and especially online free porn. It's completely changed the way our society works. So, for example, teenage pregnancies have been going down, and one of the leading theories of this is because we're at home masturbating instead of going off into the woods and having sex with our friends at school. It's true, but it's
To the woods.
Or at school.
Isn't that where you did it? I don't know. But the problem is online free porn has a very skewed version of what sex is like. It's often not very realistic. So, for example, one of our board advisors, she's a gynecologist. Her 11-year-old son came to her and was like, "Mum, can I ask you a question?" She's like, "Of course, honey, ask me anything." And he says, "When I go on a first date with a girl, will she want me to do anal sex on her?"
Oh.
Yeah. And she had to be like, maybe hold her hand first, you know. But there's like a huge rise of people going to hospital with anal prolapses and things like that because they're going straight to anal because it's what they see on porn. Labiaplasties have increased 500% on the NHS. So labiaplasty is when you have surgery to make your inner lips on your vulva smaller. And the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has said that the major factor in this is a skewed representation of vulvas in popular media. They mean porn, they're just too afraid to say it.
Not the Daily Mail on Sunday.
And it's had a huge effect on our society, and we have to talk about it because the average age of seeing online porn for the first time in this country is now 8.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
wow.
And so if we don't talk about it, if we don't talk about what sex is supposed to look like, and especially queer sex, they will be learning it. Our kids will be learning it from the internet.
Should porn be restricted? There was a big conversation last year, and it nearly was restricted.
Yeah.
Do you think, from your professional standpoint, should it be blocked? Should you have to pay to access it?
I think the difficulty is not whether you have to pay for it, but what is the system in place for it. So when this whole thing was happening, the only industry organization that was invited to sit on that panel was MindGeek, who is the company that owns all of online free porn, Brazzers, YouPorn, RedTube, all of those. And if they're the only industry representative on that panel, they're going to end up having a monopoly. And also they wanted us to submit some kind of ID to prove that you were over 18. And I don't want a porn company having my ID.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, people think it will be a good thing, but then again, On the other hand, what you can do if you're worried about your children watching it is you can put up controls on your home Wi-Fi. You know, there are existing measures to control it, and I don't think the government getting involved is going to be necessarily the best way.
Well, interesting, what the research shows is that when kids watch porn, which is what everybody panics about, when young people watch porn, their first reaction isn't fascination or anything, it's actually fear. It's actually scared. They don't quite understand what's going on. So it isn't about, we cannot control the medium. The medium is massive. And I would say that putting age restrictions on porn may potentially be damaging, because porn for some people is their sex education. You know, that is how they explore who they are and get to know who they are, what they do and don't like. I'm not saying there's not bad sides of porn, and there's a lot of skew that happens, which is, I completely agree with what you're saying on that. What we need to do is give young people coping mechanisms and instructions and guidance on how to deal with what they're watching. If we watch bad films on TV, there's a lot of stuff on telly, there's a lot of crap on telly, we don't then say, oh, we have to regulate everything that's on telly to make sure it is educational and amazing and incredible. No, what we say to our young people is that you realize that's telly, right? It's not real. Yeah. That's not real life. This is what we need to be teaching young people, is actually learn how to differentiate porn from reality. And actually, if you see something that you're worried about and doesn't make sense to you, speak to somebody about it and realize that is not the real world. That's where we're failing. We're not failing on
dummies.
Hey, porn for dummies.
I think that's really true, though. Like it's so sex in general is just so stigmatized that causes a problem, and actually we need to just destigmatize it so that it's talked about in a really natural way. And you mentioned douching earlier, but I think that's such an important thing to talk about, because we're so ashamed of the fact that when you have sex with someone, if you're doing anal, there might be some kind of extra.
I mean, sex is messy,
but it's messy.
It's
sex is meant to be
sex
messy.
Sex is messy. It's not meant to be clean. You're not supposed to walk away from it and be antibacterially wipe-free and germ-free. Like you get in there, whether you're having anal sex or other forms of sex, it's not the cleanest experience. It's sweaty, it's messy, and you, at least if you're doing it properly, surely, you should be.
But it should be enjoyable, and I think that's one of the main things that needs to happen.
Well, the joy is something that we would need to finish on, because, I mean, gay sex, obviously, we mentioned before, a lot of us learn about our sex through porn. We have to discover it ourselves, because we're not taught about it other than through the lens of reproduction. So, I mean, for years, gay sex has been demonized, lesbian sex and trans sex has been fetishized. How do we move forward? What is good queer sex for us, for everybody? You first.
Why me first?
What do you look for in a good queer sexual experience?
What do I look for in a good queer sexual experience? Oh, just someone who'll talk to you would be quite nice, wouldn't it? A drink beforehand, that would be quite good. I think no matter, as James said, it's important that we don't demonize sex, and we have to be very careful about how we stigmatize it and different types of sex, and shaming people for whatever reason is unacceptable. Your sexual experience is what it means to you, and it's different for different people. There is no one blanket rule for everyone. So as long as you're happy and comfortable and having a good time, and it's not illegal, that's pretty much it. That is the basics. As long as you're not hurting anyone, it's not illegal, and you're having fun, boom, there you go.
Charlie? What's good queer sex?
Oh, can I bring it back to the question that was just asked before, slightly, because I don't know how to answer that question because I've not had it in about 4 years. But I would say that the porn industry needs to do a bit better in the porn that they're putting out. I don't think porn should be stopped or restricted or whatever. I think we do need to understand and help kids understand that it is not reality. But for example, just you don't see the woman come during sex, you don't see, or for example, trans porn is called tranny porn. That shouldn't be allowed. Yeah. It's not called faggot porn. That would be so offensive. It just shouldn't be allowed, because if that's the first way most men who are interested in me engage with me, they're calling me a tranny, not even realizing they're being rude. They're like, oh, I've always wanted to be with a tranny. I'm like, baby, you need to...
So what do you look for in what do you want to leave when you have a sexual experience and a sexual encounter?
The reason I bring it back to porn is because it's most people's first, especially for a trans person, people's first engagement with trans people, trans sex. And I think that if the porn is better, the sex will be better. And the same for women. If the woman was shown coming, boys would know you have to do that, because that's how they're learning to do anal every time, 11-year-olds. Do you know what I'm saying? I think porn needs to be better, and then sex will be better.
What's a good sexual experience?
I think good queer sex is, the key to it is what the key is to all good sex, which is communication. It's like absolutely every single thing in sex can be resolved with communication, being clear and open. And I personally find it really hard. I find it especially in bed when I'm like, oh, I want to like look pretty all the time and I hope they're enjoying it. For me to say, oh, actually, don't do that or do this is really, really hard, but I realize I'm never gonna, like they're not gonna read my mind.
I think there's this expectation that sex should always be amazing.
Yeah.
And it should always be the best sex ever. And actually sometimes it can just be two bodies together, enjoying each other, being intimate and touching each other and being physically responsive. It doesn't need to be mind-blowing every single time.
And if
Or does it?
but also if it's okay to laugh and it's okay to have fun and if things go badly, you know, it's fine. It's like, it's not the end of the world, you know.
And not
Jane.
all sex is great sex. It's not. Like you said, it doesn't have to be mind-blowing because often it isn't mind-blowing.
James, what's good with sex for you?
Isn't it?
Maybe that's just my skewed experience.
Call me after. No, I think for me, actually, it's trust and also love. And you don't have to be in love with someone to love them. And we all need to love each other as humans. So it's a respect thing, I think. Because you can do anything in bed if you want, as long as the other person wants to do it too. And we do watch a lot of porn, or I do. And I think we can, and I've definitely done this, tried to sort of recreate porn in sexual experiences, whether it's choking or spitting or whatever. And I think it's fine to do those things as long as the other person also wants to do that.
Consensual.
So for me, it's about consent and being happy and respecting the other person as much as you respect yourself.
We need to start to wrap up. I just want to end on an incredible quote from Margaret Cho, the great Margaret Cho. She said, it's one of the great things about sexuality. It can bring us closer than maybe other forms of communication can't. Because sexuality is such an intimate thing to us. It communicates with your body, with your voice, with all your senses are involved. And it's such a wonderful thing that I don't think we prioritize just that degree of intimacy that it delivers each time. So on that note, as we wrap up, because I've got people telling me in my ear that we have to close up, I just want to say there's Attitude magazines out by the Dean Street, the incredible 56 Dean Street booth out the corner. If you all want to go and grab one, you can. We've got a video coming up with Attitude magazine where we interview drag queens to ask them about their identity and how drag sets them free. And then we're going to move on to the incredible Glamru, who is one of our columnists and all-round fantastic, fabulous person, author, performer, and just heaven sent. Go forth, copulate, be consensual, be polite, be kind, be generous, and have fun.